She worked for 41 years. Same company, same building, same mop, same floors, same silence. And when she turned 84 and her body finally said enough, the company that built its fortune on the backs of people like her looked her in the eye and said, "We have no record of your employment." 41 years. Erased, like she never existed. So she did something no one expected. She walked up to the most dangerous man in Stamford, Connecticut, a man the FBI had been trying to bring down for a decade, and asked him for help. She didn't know who he was. She just knew he was the only person who didn't walk past her. But the moment he said yes, his entire empire started to crack, because helping an 84-year-old woman get what she was owed put him on a collision course with the same corporation that was laundering his money. And now he had to choose, protect himself or protect her. What he chose cost him everything he had built, and what she gave him in return was worth more than everything he'd lost. If you walk away from this story now, you'll never understand why a mafia boss risked his freedom for a stranger. Subscribe to Tales by Wave and share this with someone who needs to hear it, because this story could save someone from making the same mistake of staying silent. This one is going to break your heart before it rebuilds it. Ruthie Mae Colton was 84 years old, and she was sitting on a wooden bench outside the Amara Pharmaceuticals headquarters in downtown Stamford, Connecticut, holding a manila folder so thick the rubber band around it was about to snap. She had been sitting there for 3 hours. She had arrived at 7 in the morning, dressed in her best clothes, a navy blue church dress she hadn't worn since her husband Clarence's funeral in 2019, low-heeled black shoes that pinched her swollen feet, and a gray wool coat that smelled like mothballs and memories. She had taken 2 buses and walked 6 blocks because she couldn't afford a taxi, and she was too proud to ask her neighbor for a ride. The folder contained 41 years of her life, pay stubs she had saved in a shoebox under her bed, handwritten schedules her supervisors had given her, a faded photograph of her standing with the janitorial crew in 1983, all of them in matching gray uniforms, all of them smiling because the company had just given them matching windbreakers for Christmas. A letter of commendation from 1997 for perfect attendance, 12 consecutive years without a single sick day. Tax returns, W-2 forms, a retirement benefits enrollment form she had signed in 2004 with her careful, steady handwriting. And tucked behind the tax returns, a small handwritten note on yellow paper from a night supervisor dated November 1994. It read, "Integrity noted." Ruthie Mae had found a scientist's wallet on the bathroom floor that night, $2,300 in cash. She turned it into security before her break was over. The scientist never thanked her, never asked who found it, never even knew her name. But Ruthie Mae kept the note, because sometimes the only proof that you did the right thing is a scrap of paper nobody else remembers writing. And at the very front of the folder, a single letter from Amara Pharmaceuticals' Human Resources Department dated 3 months ago. It read, "After a thorough review of our employment records, we are unable to verify continuous full-time employment under the name Ruthie Mae Colton. As such, we are unable to process your retirement benefit claim at this time. If you believe this determination is an error, you may submit additional documentation for review within 60 days. She had submitted additional documentation, twice. Both times, the same letter came back. Different date, same words. Ruthie Mae had started at Amara in 1982. She was 43 years old then, a mother of 2, married to Clarence, who drove a city bus. She mopped the floors of the research wing from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning, 5 nights a week. She cleaned the bathrooms, she emptied the trash cans of scientists who made 6 figures and never once looked at her face. She scrubbed chemical stains from laboratory tiles on her hands and knees because the company wouldn't buy a proper floor machine for the night crew. She did this for 41 years, through 3 company mergers, through 4 name changes, through a building renovation that moved her shift to a temporary facility for 11 months, through 2 knee replacements that she paid for out of pocket because the company had classified her as a contracted service worker for the first 16 years, which meant no health insurance, no sick days, and no retirement contributions. In 2004, after a class action lawsuit forced Amara to reclassify its custodial staff as full-time employees, Ruthie Mae finally got benefits. She signed the enrollment form, she watched the deductions come out of every paycheck for 19 years, and she kept working because Clarence had died without life insurance and their savings went to his medical bills, and she needed every dollar. When she finally retired at 83, she filed her benefit claim and waited. 3 months later, the letter arrived. No record of employment. 41 years. Erased. Ruthie Mae had tried everything. She called human resources 17 times. She was transferred, put on hold, disconnected, and once told that the system is being updated and to try again in 30 days. She went to a legal aid office on Broad Street. The lawyer was sympathetic but honest. Amara had a legal team of 45 attorneys. A pro bono case against them would take 3 to 5 years. Ruthie Mae was 84. She had arthritis in both hands, high blood pressure, and a heart that her doctor said needed monitoring. She didn't have 3 to 5 years. She might not have 1. So, this morning, she had come to the building one last time. She walked through the glass doors of the lobby, the same lobby she had mopped 10,000 times, and asked to see someone in the benefits department. The security guard, a young man who had never seen her before, asked if she had an appointment. She didn't. He told her she couldn't go upstairs without one. She asked if she could wait. He pointed to the bench. Outside. 3 hours later, she was still on the bench. Her feet ached, her back screamed, the autumn wind cut through her wool coat. People walked past her, men in suits, women in heels, couriers with packages, and not one person stopped. Not one person asked if she was okay. She was invisible, the same invisibility she had lived inside for 41 years. Ruthie Mae opened the manila folder on her lap and looked at the photograph from 1983, 12 people in gray uniforms. She was the only one still alive. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She had made a promise to Clarence a long time ago. Don't let them see you break, Ruthie. That's what they want. So she sat on that bench with her back straight and her jaw set and her swollen feet throbbing, and she held on to the folder like it was the only proof she had ever existed in this world. Shin Jae-won was 57 years old, and he was about to have his worst day of his life. He stepped out of a black Mercedes S-Class on the corner of Tresser Boulevard, 2 blocks from the Amara building. He was wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit, no tie, black leather shoes that cost more than most people's rent. His silver hair was cut sharp. His jaw was harder than the concrete he walked on. He moved like a man who owned the ground beneath him, because in many parts of the city, he did. Jae-won controlled a network that stretched from the ports of Newark to the warehouses of Bridgeport to the quiet office parks of Fairfield County. Import-export was the public story. What moved through those ports, electronics, auto parts, pharmaceuticals, was real. What moved alongside them was not. For 23 years, Jae-won had built an empire on the principle that silence was more valuable than violence, and that the best criminals were the ones nobody suspected. But today, silence was no longer an option. This morning, his attorney had called at 5:45. The FBI had issued a subpoena for financial records connected to 3 shell companies Jae-won used to move money through legitimate businesses. One of those businesses was Amara Pharmaceuticals. For the past 6 years, Jae-won had a quiet arrangement with Amara's CFO. Clean money went in through consulting contracts. Dirty money came out through inflated vendor payments. It was elegant. It was invisible. And as of this morning, it was under federal investigation. Jae-won had 72 hours to distance himself from Amara before the subpoena became public. 72 hours to move money, destroy connections, and disappear from every record that tied him to that building. His attorney was clear. Do not go near Amara. Do not be seen within a mile of that building. Do not make contact with anyone inside. But Jae-won needed one thing from that building: a hard drive in the CFO's office that contained records of every transaction. If the FBI got that drive before he did, he would spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. So here he was, 2 blocks away, about to walk into the most dangerous building in his world. He turned the corner onto Atlantic Street, moving quickly, head down. And then he stopped. An old woman was sitting on a bench outside the Amara building. She was black, small, dressed in a navy blue dress and a gray coat that looked like it had been taken out of storage for a special occasion. She was holding a thick manila folder on her lap, and she was talking to herself. No, not talking, praying. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving silently, her hands trembling on the folder. Jae-won glanced up at the building behind her and felt a cold recognition settle in his chest. He knew that logo. He knew the people behind it. He knew exactly what kind of company Amara was because he'd spent 6 years watching their CFO cook the books. He knew how they moved money, how they buried liabilities, how they made problems disappear. And looking at this old woman praying on a bench outside their front door, he had a sickening feeling he knew exactly what kind of problem they had made disappear this time. Jae-won had seen 1,000 people on 1,000 benches in his life. He had walked past every single one. But something about this woman stopped him. Maybe it was the way she held that folder, like it was a life raft. Maybe it was the shoes, church shoes, the kind his grandmother used to wear in Busan, polished until they shone, worn until they hurt. Maybe it was the fact that she was praying outside a building that Jae-won knew, better than anyone, did not answer prayers. He should have kept walking. Every second he stood still was a second he was visible. He sat down on the bench. "Are you all right?" he asked. His English was precise, accented, careful. Ruthie Mae opened her eyes. She looked at him, the suit, the silver hair, the sharp face. She didn't see a mafia boss. She saw a man who had stopped. The first one all day. "They won't see me," she said. Her voice was thin but steady, the voice of a woman who had swallowed her pain so many times it had become a flavor she recognized. "I worked in that building for 41 years. 41 years, and now they say they don't know who I am." "What do you mean?" "My retirement benefits. I'm owed 11 years of pension contributions. They say they can't find my records, but I have the records right here." She patted the folder. "I have everything. Pay stubs, tax forms, a letter they gave me in 1997 thanking me for 12 years of perfect attendance. 12 years I never missed a day, and now they tell me I don't exist." Jae-won looked at the folder. He looked at the building. He knew exactly what Amara was. He knew the people who ran it. He knew how they operated, because he operated with them. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" he asked. "Legal aid says it could take 3 to 5 years. She paused. "I'm 84, baby. I don't have that kind of time. I've got a prescription for my blood pressure that costs $210 a month. I've been cutting the pills in half to make them last. My doctor says if I keep doing that, my heart could stop." She looked at him with eyes that had seen 84 years of this country and still had the grace to call a stranger baby. "I don't need charity," she said firmly. "I need what I earned. 41 years I mopped those floors. I raised my children on that paycheck. I buried my husband on that paycheck. I paid taxes on every dollar, and now they tell me none of it happened." She paused, and her voice cracked for the first time. Just a hairline fracture. "Can you help me? I don't even know what I'm asking for. I just need someone to believe me." 41 years of work, and they erased her like she never existed. If that doesn't make your blood boil, check your pulse. If you know anyone, a parent, a grandparent, anyone who gave their life to a job that forgot them, share this story with them right now. Let them know they're not alone. Subscribe to Tales by Wave because what this man does next will either restore your faith or shatter it. Jae-won sat on that bench for a long time. He should have said, "I'm sorry, I can't help," and walked away. That was the smart move, the safe move, the move his attorney, his lieutenants, and every survival instinct in his body was screaming at him to make. But Jae-won was not sitting on that bench by accident. He was sitting there because 40 years ago, in Busan, South Korea, his grandmother, a woman named Shin Myung-hee, worked in a textile factory for 27 years. When the factory closed, the owners declared bankruptcy, restructured under a new name, and told every worker that their pension obligations had been dissolved in the restructuring. His grandmother lost everything. She spent the last 4 years of her life in a single room, boiling the same tea leaves 3 times because she couldn't afford new ones. She died at 71. The cause of death was heart failure, but Jae-won knew the truth. She died because the people who owed her decided they weren't worth paying. He looked at Ruthie Mae Colton and saw Myung-hee. Same hands, same shoes, same folder full of proof that nobody wanted to read. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ruthie Mae Colton." "My name is Jae-won, and I believe you." He took the folder. He opened it. He read the pay stubs, the tax forms, the letter of commendation. He studied the enrollment form she had signed in 2004. He looked at the photograph from 1983, 12 people in gray uniforms, smiling. "This is a complete record," he said quietly. "There is no ambiguity here." "Then why won't they pay me?" Because Jae-won knew why. He knew exactly why. Amara had gone through 3 mergers in the last 2 decades. Each merger allowed the company to migrate employee records to a new system. During each migration, certain records, always the lowest paid workers, always the ones without advocates, always the ones who wouldn't fight back, disappeared. It wasn't a glitch, it was a strategy, a deliberate, systematic erasure of pension obligations that saved the company millions every year. Jae-won knew this because his laundering arrangement depended on understanding exactly how Amara moved money. He had seen the internal accounting. He knew where the bodies were buried, literally and financially. And he also knew that the man responsible, Amara's CFO, a man named Victor Hargrove, was the same man whose office contained the hard drive Jae-won desperately needed. Helping Ruthie Mae meant confronting Hargrove. Confronting Hargrove meant being seen inside the building. Being seen inside the building meant connecting himself to Amara exactly when the FBI was building a case against him. Helping this woman could send him to prison. Jae-won closed the folder and handed it back to her. He stared at the building for a long moment, then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Cancel my afternoon. All of it." He looked at Ruthie Mae. "Come with me." Ruthie Mae didn't move right away. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I know this won't be fixed overnight. I'm not a fool. I know how these people operate. They wait you out. They wait until you're too tired or too sick or too dead to fight." Jae-won looked at her. "I know how they operate too. Better than you think. But I'm not going to wait them out. I'm going to make it too expensive for them to keep fighting. That's a different game. And what if it takes longer than you think? Then we fight longer, but you're not fighting alone anymore." Ruthie Mae studied his face for a long time. Whatever she saw there was enough. She gripped her manila folder with both arthritic hands, stood up slowly from the bench, and followed him. The next 4 days nearly destroyed him. Day 1, Jae-won called a labor attorney named Grace Nakamura, one of the best employment lawyers in the East Coast, based in Manhattan, whose retainer started at $50,000. He paid it from a personal account he knew the FBI hadn't flagged yet. Grace reviewed Ruthie Mae's documents in 3 hours and confirmed what Jae-won already knew. The records were airtight. Amara had no legal basis for the denial. The problem wasn't evidence. The problem was power. Amara had 45 attorneys. Ruthie Mae had a manila folder and a prayer. Grace sent a formal demand letter to Amara's legal department. The response came back in 6 hours. We stand by our determination. Any further correspondence should be directed to our litigation team. They weren't going to fold. They were going to fight. They were going to drag an 84-year-old woman through years of depositions, motions, and delays until she either gave up or died, whichever came first. Day 2, Jae-won's attorney called in a panic. Someone at Amara is asking questions about who hired Grace Nakamura. They're running the transaction trace. If they connect that retainer to you, the FBI will have a direct financial link between you and Amara. You need to pull out, now. Jae-won didn't pull out. Instead, he did something that made his attorney physically ill. He called a journalist, a Pulitzer-winning investigative reporter at the Hartford Courant named Deshaun Okafa, who had been covering corporate pension fraud for 3 years. Jae-won fed him everything, not about himself, but about Amara's pattern of erasing low-wage workers from retirement systems during mergers. He gave him the framework without the evidence, and then he told Deshaun where to find the evidence, in the stories of other workers just like Ruthie Mae. Within 48 hours, Deshaun had found 14 other former Amara employees, all custodial, all hourly, all people of color whose retirement records had vanished during the same merger periods. 14 people, same company, same denial letters, same language. This wasn't a mistake, this was a pattern. 14 workers erased, 45 attorneys protecting the people who did it, and the only man fighting for them is running out of time himself. This is not just a story, this is happening right now in companies across America. Share this video so it reaches someone who needs to hear it. Tales by Wave doesn't tell stories for the faint of heart. Subscribe or you'll miss how deep this goes. Day 3, Jae-won's world started collapsing. His lieutenant, a man named Park Sung-ho, came to his house in Greenwich at midnight. Sung-ho had been with Jae-won for 17 years. He was not a man who showed up unannounced. The FBI pulled transaction records from the Bridgeport warehouse. They're subpoenaing 3 more accounts tomorrow. 2 of them are yours. Jae-won sat in his study, the same room where he had made decisions that shaped the economy of 3 states, and felt the walls closing in. "There's more," Sung-ho said. "Hargrove called. He knows you're behind the Nakamura retainer. He's threatening to turn over the consulting contracts to the FBI unless you back off the pension case." Jae-won understood the mathematics perfectly. Victor Hargrove, the same man who had been laundering Jae-won's money for 6 years, was now using that arrangement as leverage to protect Amara from a retirement fraud case. If Jae-won continued helping Ruthie Mae, Hargrove would hand the FBI everything they needed to build a RICO case. If he backed off, Hargrove would stay quiet, and an 84-year-old woman would lose the only advocate she had ever had. "What do you want to do?" Sung-ho asked. Jae-won thought about his grandmother, the single room, the reused tea leaves, the factory owners who restructured their way out of responsibility while the people who built their wealth with their hands were left with nothing. He thought about Ruthie Mae, her church shoes, her manila folder, her 12 years of perfect attendance. And he thought about himself, his houses, his cars, his accounts, the empire he had spent 23 years building. Everything he would lose. "Set a meeting with Hargrove," Jae-won said. "Tomorrow, in person." Jae-won? Tomorrow. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his kitchen at 3 in the morning, drinking barley tea his grandmother used to make, and he called Ruthie Mae. She answered on the second ring. 84 years old, and she still answered the phone like she was expecting important news. "Did I wake you?" he asked. "Baby, I've been waking up at 4 in the morning since 1982. My body doesn't know how to sleep past it. Still thinks I have floors to mop." There was a long silence. Jae-won held the phone against his ear and felt the weight of what he was about to say. "Ruthie Mae, there are people who don't want me to help you." "I know." "You know?" "I'm 84, not stupid. A man in a suit that costs more than my rent shows up out of nowhere and hires a Manhattan lawyer for a stranger. I figured there was more to the story." She paused. "I don't know what kind of man you are, Jae-won. I don't know what you do, but I know what you did. You've stopped. Nobody else stopped. He closed his eyes. If I keep going, it could cost me everything. Then stop, she said gently. Baby, I have lived 84 years. I have buried a husband, raised 2 children, lost one to the streets, and watched the other move so far away she forgot my phone number. I have cleaned toilets and mopped floors and smiled at people who never learned my name. I have survived things that were designed to kill me. If this is the thing that finally beats me, then it beats me. But I will not let it beat you, too. Jaewon's hand tightened around the phone. That's not how this works, he said quietly. My grandmother died because a company decided she wasn't worth what they owed her. I sat in her room after the funeral and I swore I would never let that happen to anyone again if I had the power to stop it. And you've been carrying that promise all this time? Every day. Ruthie Mae was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed the temperature of the conversation. Jaewon, promises made to the dead are the heaviest kind, but they're also the most sacred. You don't break those. Not for money, not for safety, not for anything. He stared at the kitchen ceiling. The barley tea had gone cold. I'll see you tomorrow, Ruthie Mae. I'll be up. He could walk away right now and save everything he built. She just gave him permission to leave, and he's still choosing to stay. If you're not crying yet, you will be. Share this with someone who's going through a hard time. Sometimes knowing that a stranger chose to fight for another stranger is the only comfort you need. Subscribe to Tales by Wave and check the comments. Our family drops stories in there that will touch your heart just as deep as this one. Day 4. The meeting with Hargrove. The Amara Building, 32nd floor, corner office overlooking the Long Island Sound. Victor Hargrove, 59, Wharton educated, $300 haircut, the kind of man who played golf with senators and slept well at night knowing that the janitors who cleaned his office would never see a pension. Jaewon walked in alone. No security, no wire, no backup plan. You look terrible, Hargrove said, leaning back in his leather chair. Pay the woman her benefits. Hargrove laughed. You came here for that? I thought you came to negotiate your survival. I'm negotiating hers. Hargrove leaned forward. Let me explain something to you, Jaewon. This company has eliminated retirement obligations for over 200 low-level employees across 3 merger cycles. That saves us $14 million a year. You think I'm going to jeopardize $14 million because a janitor kept some pay stubs? She kept everything, and there are 14 others. 14 people with no lawyers, no resources, and no voice. They have a voice now. The Hartford Courant is running the story. The reporter has 12 on-the-record interviews. The color drained from Hargrove's face. For 3 seconds, he sat completely still. Then his jaw tightened. You're bluffing. The article runs Friday. If that article runs, I'll give the FBI everything. Every transaction, every shell company, every payment. You'll be in handcuffs by Saturday morning. Jaewon looked at him. The silence between them stretched like a wire about to snap. Then we both fall, Jaewon said calmly. But here's the difference between you and me, Victor. When I fall knowing I did one thing right. When you fall knowing you stole pensions from 84-year-old women to buy this view. He stood up. Pay her. Pay all 15 of them. Full benefits, retroactive to the date of each denial, medical coverage reinstated, a formal letter of acknowledgement recognizing Ruthie Mae's 41 years of employment, and a clause buried on page 9 that Jaewon's name would appear nowhere in any document, any filing, or any public statement. And you can explain to the board why a Pulitzer winner is writing about your company's policy of erasing elderly Black workers from the retirement system. Jaewon walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. You have 24 hours. The next 24 hours were the longest of Jaewon's life. He moved money. He called his attorney. He began the process of dismantling 6 years of financial arrangements with a company that was about to become the most investigated corporation in Connecticut. He knew Hargrove might turn him in anyway. He knew the FBI might already have enough. He knew that tomorrow he might be sitting in a federal holding cell instead of his kitchen. He called Ruthie Mae one more time. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "check your mailbox." "What's going to be in it?" "What you earned." At 4:17 the next morning, Grace Nakamura called. Amara's legal team had sent a settlement agreement at 3 in the morning. Full retirement benefits for Ruthie Mae Colton, retroactive to 2004, full pension payments for all 15 affected workers, medical coverage reinstated, a formal letter of acknowledgement recognizing Ruthie Mae's 41 years of employment, and a clause buried on page 9 that Jaywon's name would appear nowhere in any document, any filing, or any public statement. Jaywon had blinked. He chose his $14 million system over exposing a man who could expose him right back. Mutually assured destruction. Except in this version, the 84-year-old woman won. When Ruthie Mae opened her mailbox that Friday morning and found the letter from Amara, the real letter, the one that said her name, her years, her money, she sat down on her front steps and cried. She cried the way people cry when they've been holding their breath for so long that the first full inhale feels like drowning. She cried for every floor she mopped, for every scientist who never looked at her, for Clarence, who always said, "Don't let them see you break." She cried because someone had finally seen her. Someone had believed her. Someone had risked everything so that a woman with a manila folder and church shoes could receive what the law said was hers. She called Jaywon. He answered on the first ring. "I got the letter," she said, her voice shaking. "Good." "Jaywon, what did this cost you?" A long pause. "Nothing I was willing to pay." That was not true. Over the next 3 months, Jaywon systematically dismantled his relationship with Amara, severed 3 shell companies, and restructured his entire financial operation, a process that cost him an estimated $40 million in disrupted revenue and forced him to close 2 warehouses. The FBI investigation continued, but without Hargrove's cooperation, and without the hard drive that Jaywon had quietly retrieved during the settlement negotiations, the case stalled. No indictment came, but the empire Jaywon had built over 23 years was permanently reduced. He was still powerful, but he was no longer untouchable. When people asked him later if it was worth it, he always said the same thing. "My grandmother died in a single room because a company decided she wasn't worth what they owed her. Ruthie Mae is alive because I decided she was. That's not a loss. That's the only deal I ever made that I'm proud of." He lost $40 million so an 84-year-old woman could get her pension. She lost 41 years of proof and still didn't break. If this story taught you something about dignity, about sacrifice, about what it really means to help someone when it costs you everything, then share it. Send it to your mother. Send it to your grandmother. Send it to anyone who has ever been told they don't matter. Let this story be their comfort. Subscribe to Tales by Wave because we have more stories like this that will shake your soul. Check the comments. Our family always leaves their favorites down there. Go look. You'll find something that speaks directly to your heart. 6 months later, Ruthie Mae Colton stood in the lobby of the Amara building one last time. But this time, she wasn't holding a manila folder. She was holding a framed copy of the Hartford Courant article that Deshaun Okava had published, a front-page investigation into corporate pension fraud that led to a state-level audit of retirement benefit denials across 14 companies in Connecticut. The article named no whistleblowers, but it named the practice, and it named the people it hurt. Ruthie Mae donated her first full pension check to the Stanford Public Library's Elder Literacy Program, because if I had known my rights 40 years ago, she told the librarian, I wouldn't have needed a stranger on a bench to fight for them. Jaywon didn't come to the ceremony. He couldn't. Being seen with Ruthie Mae in public would connect him to the case in ways that could still be dangerous. But that evening, a package arrived at Ruthie Mae's apartment. Inside was a small wooden box. Inside the box was a teacup, old, ceramic, cracked and repaired with gold in the Japanese style of kintsugi. A note was folded beneath it. This was my grandmother's. She was a factory worker in Busan who lost her pension when her company closed. She drank burley tea from this cup every morning until the day she died. I've carried it for 30 years. I want you to have it now. You and she would have understood each other. J. Ruthie Mae held the cup in her arthritic hands and traced the gold lines where it had been broken and put back together. She thought about how the Japanese art of kintsugi teaches that broken things are not worthless. They are more beautiful for having been repaired. That the gold in the cracks is not a flaw. It is proof that the object survived. She placed the cup on her windowsill, next to the photograph of Clarence, and whispered, "I didn't let them see me break, baby. I didn't let them see me break." Ruthie Mae Colton worked 41 years and was told she didn't exist. She sat on a bench outside the building that stole her future and prayed for someone to stop. 300 people walked past her that morning. One sat down. He was the wrong person. He was dangerous, compromised, and standing on ground that was already crumbling beneath him. Helping her accelerated his own destruction. But he did it anyway. Not because he was good, but because he remembered a promise he made in a small room in Busan, standing over the body of a woman the world had decided wasn't worth keeping. In America, an estimated 3 million retirees have had benefit claims denied or delayed due to record discrepancies during corporate mergers. Most of them never fight back. Most of them don't have a manila folder. Most of them don't have a stranger on a bench. But every single one of them has a name, and every name deserves to be remembered. Jaewon's empire shrank. His fortune cracked. But like the teacup he gave to Ruthie Mae, the cracks were filled with something more valuable than what was lost. And the gold that held him together now was not money. It was the knowledge that when it mattered most, he chose right. Some people build empires. Some people build legacies. Ruthie Mae taught Jaewon the difference. And if you're still watching, you already know which one matters more. If this story made you feel something real, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs comfort today. Share it with someone who's been fighting a battle nobody sees. Share it with someone who's been told they don't exist by a system that was built to forget them. That's how stories like this change the world, not by sitting in one heart, but by spreading to thousands. Like, subscribe, and come back to Tales by Wave, because we tell the stories that other channels are afraid to tell. And if you want more stories that hit like this one, check the comments right now. Our Tales by Wave family always pins their favorites down there. Stories about dignity, about sacrifice, about people who refused to stay invisible. Go look. I promise you'll find one that feels like it was written just for you. And if you're still not subscribed, I'll be right here when you're ready. But don't wait too long. The next story drops soon, and it might be the one that changes how you see everything.